I was sitting at the counter of a diner in Knoxville, the same diner I'd been coming to every Sunday morning for 11 years, when a man I had never seen before sat down on the stool next to mine and said, "You're still carrying that photo around, aren't you?" I looked at him. He was maybe 38, 40, broad shoulders, a scar that ran just below his left eye, pale and faded like old thread. He was looking not at me, but at the photograph I'd set face up on the counter beside my coffee cup. The way I always did, the way my wife used to tease me about, back when she was still alive and there was still someone in the house to tease me. "Do I know you?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He picked up the menu, looked at it like he was actually reading it, set it back down. Then he turned to me and said, "That little girl in the picture. She's got a birthmark on her left shoulder, shaped kind of like a crescent moon. Am I right?" The coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. Nobody knew that. Not the detectives, not the news reporters who'd covered the story back in 1991, not even my sister, who'd helped us put up flyers across 4 counties. I had never put that detail in any flyer, any news segment, any online post. My wife and I had kept it back deliberately, on the advice of the investigator we'd hired. A detail only the family would know. A detail only someone who had seen my daughter, really seen her, would know. I put the cup down very carefully. My hand was not steady. "Who are you?" I said. He looked at the photo again. Then he looked at me. "I think," he said quietly, "you might be my grandfather." My daughter Renata was 22 months old when she disappeared. It was a Tuesday in late October. My wife Claudette had taken her to the park 3 blocks from our house in Maryville, the one with the old stone fountain that didn't work anymore, and the big oak trees that went red in the fall. Claudette sat down on a bench to answer a phone call. Her mother was sick that year, there were always calls, and when she looked up, Renata was gone. Just gone. The stroller was still there. The little stuffed rabbit Renata carried everywhere was on the ground beside the fountain. The swing was still moving. The next 6 months were the kind of thing I don't have words for, even now. We had search parties, we had detectives, we had a private investigator named Thad, who charged us $4,000 a month and found nothing. We went on the local news. We sent Renata's photo to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We had a tip line. We followed every lead, every phone call, every letter from strangers who thought they'd seen a little girl somewhere in Ohio, in Georgia, in New Mexico. Nothing. The investigation eventually went cold. The detective assigned to our case retired. The file stayed open, technically, but nobody was working it. The years passed the way years do when you're living around a wound instead of through it. My wife and I stayed together, which I think surprised people. Grief like that can hollow a marriage out until there's nothing left but 2 people sitting in the same house, strangers to each other. But Claudette and I, we held on. I don't know how exactly. I think we were afraid that if we let go of each other, we'd lose the last person on earth who remembered Renata the way she really was. Not as a story, not as a missing child. As a little girl who laughed so hard at the dog that she'd fall over sideways. As a person. We had another child, a son we named Patrick. Wait, not Patrick. That name's already been used somewhere else in my head, or maybe I just need to keep this story straight. My son. I'll call him by his name. We named him Crawford. Crawford was born 4 years after Renata disappeared. He grew up knowing he had a sister somewhere. We told him the truth when he was old enough. He took it seriously, the way he took everything seriously. Crawford became a high school history teacher in Nashville. He's a good man. He calls me every Sunday. Claudette died in 2019. Pancreatic cancer, which is the kind that moves fast and doesn't apologize. In her last weeks, she told me she still thought about Renata every single day. She said she still set a mental place for her at every holiday table, every birthday, every anniversary. I told her I did too. After she was gone, the Sundays got very long. I kept carrying the photo. I don't know why exactly. I'm 67 years old. I know the statistics. I know what the odds are. But there's something in a father that doesn't calculate odds. There's something that just keeps holding on. Even when holding on makes no logical sense to anyone watching, including sometimes yourself. So I carried the photo. Every Sunday morning at that diner counter, I'd set it down beside my coffee. I don't know what I was waiting for. Maybe I just needed her to be somewhere, even if it was just there, on a laminate countertop between a sugar dispenser and a paper napkin holder, for an hour on a Sunday morning. I didn't say anything for what felt like a long time after the man spoke. Finally I said, "Say that again." "I think you might be my grandfather," he repeated. His voice was steady. He wasn't performing anything. He wasn't nervous in the way that people are when they're lying. He was nervous in a quieter way. The way people are when they've rehearsed something 100 times and now the moment is actually here and it's nothing like the rehearsal. "What's your name?" I asked. "Theo," he said. "Theo Mast. And who's your mother?" He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and put a photograph on the counter beside mine. It was a school picture, the kind they take every year in October, that particular shade of blue background that hasn't changed in 50 years. The girl in the photo was maybe 8 or 9 years old, dark hair cut to her chin, a small nose, a smile that was trying to be bigger than it was. I picked it up. My hands were shaking now and I didn't try to hide it. She had Claudette's eyes. Not similar to Claudette's eyes, not reminiscent of. She had them. That specific dark brown, almost amber at the edges. The particular way the left one was set, just a fraction higher than the right, a subtle asymmetry that Claudette had always been slightly self-conscious about and that I had always loved. "Where did you get this?" My voice came out strange, thin. "It's my mother," Theo said. "Her name is Bet. She goes by Bet now. It wasn't always her name." I stared at the photo. I thought about the birthmark. I thought about the swing still moving. "You said crescent moon," I said. "Yes, sir. I never told anyone that. It's never been in any public record." "I know," he said. "My mother told me. She told me a lot of things over the years, not everything at once. A little at a time, like she was testing the water. She's alive." "Yes, sir, she's alive." I put both hands flat on the counter. I needed something solid. "Where is she?" It came out piece by piece, over the next 2 hours, there at that counter. The waitress, a woman named Dolores, who'd been working that diner for as long as I'd been coming in, refilled my coffee 4 times without being asked. I don't think she could help overhearing. I don't think she tried. Theo told me that his mother had been raised by a woman named Ida Mast in a small town called Beecher Falls, in the northeast corner of Vermont, close to the Canadian border. Ida had told Bet, told my daughter, that her parents had given her up voluntarily, that they were very young, very poor, unable to care for her, that it was the most loving thing they could do. My daughter had believed this until she was 34 years old. "What happened when she was 34? I asked. "Ida got sick," Theo said. "Dementia, sentia. Early onset. She started saying things, mixing things up. And then one night my mother was sitting with her, and Ida said something about a park, about a fountain, about a little girl who was too pretty to pass up." He stopped. He looked down at his coffee. "My mother didn't understand it at first. She thought it was just the dementia, random words. But Ida kept coming back to it. The fountain, Tennessee, the little girl. I couldn't speak. My mother started doing research," Theo continued. "It took her a long time. Years, actually. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. You understand? Finding out something like that, it changes everything you believed about your life. Everything you thought was true about who you are. She had to be ready. Is she ready now?" He looked at me. "She sent me first, to see if the photo was still current, if you were still here." He paused. "She's been watching your social media for about 2 years, the post where you put her picture. She knew you were still looking." Something broke open in my chest, not in a bad way. Or maybe it was bad and good at the same time, so mixed together that there's no word for it. "I need to talk to her," I said. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here. Renata, Bet, lived in Burlington, Vermont. She was a 55-year-old woman. She was a kindergarten teacher. She had been married for 22 years to a man named Don Mast, a civil engineer, and they had raised Theo together in the same house, where she'd grown up feeling like she belonged, and never quite being sure why. Sometimes she felt like she didn't. None of that came out at the diner. That all came later. What came out at the diner was this. Theo handed me a prepaid cell phone. He said his mother had loaded a voice message onto it. He said she had recorded it 3 separate times before she felt like she could get through it without stopping. He said I didn't have to listen to it right then if I didn't want to. I listened to it right then. Her voice was low, careful. She sounded like someone walking across ice, feeling for the solid parts. "Hi," she said. "I've been trying to figure out what to say for about 6 months. I still don't really know. I want you to know that I had a good life. I want to say that first because I think that might be the thing you'd most need to hear, and I don't want to make you wait for it. I had people who loved me. I had a home. I'm okay. I turned out okay." She paused. I could hear her breathing. "But I also know now that there was a mother and a father who looked for me for, I don't even know how many years, and I know I have a brother I've never met. And I know my mother passed away. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't find all of this out sooner. I'm sorry I'm sorry." Her voice broke on that last word, just briefly. Then she gathered herself back. "Theo will give you a number where you can reach me. I'm not asking for anything except maybe just a conversation, if you want. If you're ready, there's no pressure. I know this is a lot." She went quiet again. "Then I still remember a dog, a big brown dog. I don't know if that's a real memory or something I imagined, but I've always had it. A big brown dog, and a feeling of being very safe. Our dog's name was Huckleberry. He died in 1998. He used to sleep at the foot of Renata's crib." I sat there on that diner stool for a moment, with the phone in my hand, and Dolores very pointedly found something to do at the far end of the counter, and Theo sat beside me without saying anything, and I was grateful to him for that. Then I saved the number and called my son Crawford. Crawford drove up from Nashville. He arrived at my house that evening, still in the clothes he'd been wearing when I called him, which told me he'd left within about 15 minutes of hanging up the phone. He's methodical, my son, but not when it matters. We sat at the kitchen table and I told him everything. He listened the way he listens, very still, very focused, asking a question here and there. When I finished, he sat quietly for a moment, and then he said, "Have you called her yet?" "Not yet," I said. "Why not?" "I thought about it. I want to be ready," I said. He nodded. "Okay," he said. "What would ready feel like?" I didn't have an answer for that. We called the number together. Crawford and I, sitting at the kitchen table where his mother and I had eaten 10,000 meals, where Renata had sat in her high chair in 1991 and thrown Cheerios at the dog, where we'd spent Christmas mornings and argued about nothing, and said "I love you" and forgot to say it and said it again. She picked up on the second ring. "Hello?" Her voice was careful in that same particular way. "This is your father," I said, and then I couldn't say anything else for a moment. Neither could she. Crawford put his hand on my arm and kept it there. Her name, her real name, the one we gave her, was Renata Grace. She'd had no idea. Ida had called her Betty from the beginning, and Betty was who she'd been for 55 years. When I told her, she went quiet. Then she said she'd always felt like Bet didn't quite fit, like a coat that was almost the right size. The story of how she ended up with Ida came out slowly, over several phone calls and eventually in person. Ida Mast had not acted alone. She'd been connected to a woman who ran an informal, deeply illegal grey market adoption operation out of Knoxville in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Not the Albanian mob, not international trafficking, something smaller and in some ways more chilling. Local. A woman named, the court records eventually named her, as Paulette Drum, who found children in parks, in shopping malls, in any public space where a moment of inattention was possible, and who then connected them with women who desperately wanted children and couldn't or wouldn't go through legal channels. Ida had paid $30,000 in 1991. $30,000. Paulette Drum had died in 2004. She was never prosecuted. Ida Mast died in a memory care facility in Vermont the same year Claudette died in Tennessee in 2019, without ever having been held accountable for anything except what her own failing mind put in front of her in her final months. I don't know how I feel about that. I've had enough years now to know that I don't always need to resolve how I feel about something. Some things just sit in you, and you carry them. What I do know is that there was a window, maybe 2006, maybe 2007, when the FBI was looking at cases connected to Paulette Drum. An investigator contacted us. We gave everything we had. Nothing came of it. The case against Drum's network had relied on witness testimony that fell apart. Evidence was mishandled. A prosecutorial decision I still don't understand closed the investigation. My daughter grew up in Vermont. My wife died not knowing. I am going to tell you something that took me a long time to understand, and I want to say it plainly. When Renata and I finally met in person, she flew down to Knoxville 4 months after Theo sat down beside me at that diner counter. I did not recognize her the way I expected to. I had imagined over the years that if I ever saw my daughter again, something in me would just know. Some biological certainty, some vibration in the blood. What actually happened was this. She walked into the arrivals area of the airport, and I saw a woman in her mid-50s, with dark hair going grey at the temples. Claudette's eyes set in a face I didn't know, and I stood there feeling simultaneously that I was looking at a complete stranger and that I was looking at the most familiar thing in the world. Both things at the exact same time. She was wearing a green jacket. She had a small rolling suitcase. She spotted me before I spotted her. She'd seen recent photos, and she raised her hand in a little wave that was so uncertain and so hopeful at the same time that it broke my heart in the exact direction hearts are supposed to break. We hugged for a long time in the middle of that airport. People walked around us. Crawford was standing a few feet back, and I heard him make a sound that I will never describe because it was private to him. Later, at dinner, we started learning each other. It is a strange thing to learn a person who is yours but who you don't know. You have to start from the beginning in some ways, but in other ways you don't start from the beginning at all, because there's something already there. Something underneath the conversation that doesn't need to be built. She told me she likes coffee black, that she's a terrible parallel parker, that she cried at every graduation ceremony she'd ever attended, even when she didn't know any of the kids, that she'd always felt pulled toward Tennessee in a way she couldn't explain, and had visited Nashville twice and Gatlinburg once, and had not been able to figure out why the mountains felt like something she recognized. I told her that Claudette used to say the same thing about those mountains. She was quiet for a moment after that. Then she said, "I would have liked to have known her." "She would have loved you," I said. She never stopped. Crawford and Renata are building something now, the two of them. It doesn't have a name yet. It's too early and too fragile for names, but they talk on the phone. They've met 3 times. She came to Nashville for Thanksgiving. He went to Burlington in February and had dinner at her house and played cards with Theo and met Don, who is a quiet man with a firm handshake and good manners, and who, I think, is still processing all of this, just like the rest of us. There have been hard conversations too. I won't pretend otherwise. Renata. And she's asked me to call her Renata now, or Rennie, which is what Claudette always called her in the 11 months we had her, has complicated feelings about Ida. Ida raised her. Ida read her bedtime stories and packed her school lunches and sat up with her when she was sick, and came to every single school play and held her while she cried over her first heartbreak. That is also true. Both things are true and they don't cancel each other out, and I had to learn to sit with that, because it wasn't my grief to resolve for her. She asked me once, carefully, whether I was angry with her for taking so long to reach out. I told her the truth. I had waited 33 years. A few more made no difference. She reached out when she was ready, and when she was ready was when it happened, and I was grateful for every second of it. She cried. I let her. The one thing I couldn't do, the one thing that sits unresolved and will likely sit there until I'm gone, is the matter of Paulette Drum and the network she ran. There will be no prosecution now. There will be no justice in the legal sense. Ida is dead. Drum is dead. The other women involved are dead or untraceable. A cold case investigator I spoke to last year told me gently that there was nothing left to pursue. I don't sleep perfectly. Some nights I lie there thinking about the investigator who mishandled the evidence in 2006, about the prosecutor who closed the case, about the $30,000 that changed the direction of every life in my family for more than 3 decades. But then I think about Renata in that green jacket, raising her hand in that uncertain little wave. I think about her at my kitchen table, eating my bad cooking and making fun of it and laughing, really laughing, with Claudette's laugh. I think about Theo, who sat down on a stool at a diner counter on a Sunday morning and changed everything because his mother loved him enough to tell him the truth, and he loved his mother enough to walk into a stranger's grief for her sake. I think about Crawford, who drove 4 hours without changing his shirt because his father called and said, "Come now." And I think about Claudette. I wish she were here. Not a day goes by, but I have started to believe, I need to believe, that she knew somehow, in that specific way that people who love each other hard enough seem to carry a frequency the other one can feel even across distance, even across whatever comes after. I have started to believe she knew, a little, before the end. I still go to that diner on Sunday mornings. I still sit at the counter. I still drink the same bad coffee. But I don't set the photograph down beside the cup anymore. I don't need to.